Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day. I can't believe it's day four. Day four of Tech Educators Careers Week. We are joined once again by Nathaniel from Twilio, who was on our panel yesterday. An incredible panel. What did you think of it yesterday?
I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed sharing. I actually learned myself while being on the panel. That was nice. It was good to see some familiar faces of people I respect, giving like conversations, and then also meeting new people as well.
No, it's so good. And the feedback from the students, like for the whole week has been incredible. But I think when you have a panel discussion, it's just like it really makes you start to question and receive so much like wider knowledge. And I just love that because exactly what you said, you get to learn from everyone else. Nathaniel, hopefully we're not burning you out by getting you to do a panel talk and your own individual talk, but we just couldn't resist when you said what the talk was going to be about. So without further ado, because otherwise it would just be me talking and you're the expert, I'm going to hand over to Nathaniel from Twilio, who's going to be talking to us about 0 to 100, and I'll let you intro it in a much more concise and better way.
No worries. No worries. Hey folks, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I really have enjoyed being a part of this Careers Week, and hopefully you've enjoyed it and you have learnt so many new things. For those of you who maybe have never met me, one thing I'm a big fan of hip hop and rap music, and this title was inspired by the Drake lyric from a song called, I think it's called The Get Up, and it goes 0 to 100 real quick, and he kind of talks about how he came from nothing into this big superstar, and it happened so fast for him. So I've adopted this title. But let me just tell you a bit about myself before I begin. My name is Nathaniel Okenwa. You can refer to me as he, him. My friends know that I love to talk and I love to write code. So people call me Chatterbox Coder. And you can find me online on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, like all of those different variations, and GitHub. And you can find me at Chatterbox Coder. And I am a developer evangelist at a company called Twilio. When I actually first delivered this talk, I delivered it exactly, oh, it was 102 days after I'd started at Twilio. And it has now been 4 years since I started at Twilio, 4 years and 1 month. And a lot has changed, but a lot has remained the same. And something that has remained the same is that I've had promotions, I've had chances to grow, I've had changes of job title. And every time I get a change of job title, I kind of circle back to this talk. And it reminds me, and I sometimes actually go and look through these slides again just to remind myself about some of the lessons that I learned in my first 100 days. And hopefully, these lessons that I learned in the first 100 days can help you when you finally get your first job. And even if you've already got your first tech job, like me, this has been helpful every time I got a promotion, every time I had a change of responsibilities, and stuff like that. But one of my favorite quotes that I found when I was doing some research for this talk came from a book by Michael D. Watkins called The First 90 Days. And in that book, he says, every successful career is a series of successful assignments. And every successful assignment is launched with a successful transition. Right now, many of you may be there at the first, looking for that first successful assignment to begin your very successful career. Some people may already be a couple of assignments in, but there are many of these different assignments, and each of these has a transition that launches it. And what I want to talk about is how, in those transitions, we can make the most of getting started and getting up to speed so that we can run our best for as long as possible. All right. Now, let me take it back to my experiences when I first started at Twilio. And this was kind of the timeline for me that I'm going to use to frame this talk. Now, this may not necessarily reflect your experiences when it comes to your jobs directly, but there are going to be three phases that I think come out wherever. So for me, it was kind of like I got the job and then we slowly move on until I was in the groove. But the three phases that I think remain the same across people, regardless of what job you're in, regardless of whether it's a new job or just a new job title or just more responsibilities, three phases that I think we go through are observing, understanding, and creating. And I'm going to frame this talk through this lens. So let's start way back at the beginning, at day zero. And you just got the job. Yes, celebrations. This was pretty much me when I found out I got my job at Twilio. It was my dream job at my dream company. So I was very, very, very excited. And you may feel three things during this time. First of all, you will feel excitement. This is great. You have earned it. You should be proud of yourself and what you have achieved. But there may be some other feelings that may come with this. And one of them is that you may feel nervousness. But remember, you don't need to doubt yourself. You deserve to be there. They hired you because they saw that you were good enough for this role. One of my favorite talks, and it's funny because we had the panel yesterday. One of my favorite talks of all time was a talk by a person called Joe Franchetti, and her talk was all about imposter syndrome. And she said imposter syndrome is kind of counterintuitive because she said, do you really believe that you are smart enough to have tricked all of these smart people into thinking you're smarter than you actually are? And if you were smart enough to trick all of these people, are as smart as you think you're not. I really, really enjoyed it. But don't feel nervous. You will feel nervous, but don't doubt yourself as you go into this new role. You deserve to be there. And another thing that I felt was I felt so much support. There are so many people who are going to support you. All of the people who have been part of your journey while you've been here in your coding boot camp, your maybe family and friends, maybe mentors, people you got advice from. Me, I'm going to be supporting you. And maybe if I see like someone tweet or put on LinkedIn that they got their first tech job, I'm going to be like, yes, get in. But so many people are going to be following your journey and they're going to want you to succeed. So hopefully you'll be feeling their support. I remember when I first got my job and I tweeted about it, and like so many people tweeted, but like the CEO of the company actually tweeted and was like, welcome. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is
Wow.
amazing. So many people supporting me. So all of this happens when you find out you have the job, you're excited, you want to hit the ground running. So we finally get to day one. And day one usually goes a little something like this. There is celebrations again in the workplace. I remember in my workplace, when we had the office, in the office, they every time there was a new member, there was cake. Especially in the hiring times of 2019, there was lots of cake, and I may have put on a few Twilio pounds. But it's lots of celebrations, lots of people welcoming you. People are often very friendly, telling you about this amazing culture that this company has. But being new can sometimes really
Yep.
suck. And let's talk about this because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I was listening to a talk by Arnon Craft. This talk was also called The First 90 Days. And it told a story about him relocating from Tel Aviv to the USA. And he went to his son. I think his son was about 9, 10, or 11, quite young. And he tried to explain to his son that they were relocating. And he was like, yes, we're gonna, like, he knew he was gonna have these massive career opportunities. His wife was gonna have so many other career opportunities in the USA. And he wanted to convince his son that, yes, this is exciting. His son wasn't excited. He didn't really want to leave. And he really talked with his son and he kind of surmised that it was three things. His son was kind of saying, like, everyone knows who I am here. I have friends here. I have buddies that I do activities with on a regular basis. And another thing he said, these weren't his actual words, but kind of what it meant was that he knew how to be successful. He knows where to submit his homework. He knows his teachers. He knows the teachers that are super strict, where he mustn't whisper in the class, and maybe the teachers that will give him a little bit of an extra day of homework. And most importantly for his son at the time, it's like, I know what's cool. I know like what trainers to wear. I know the fashion sense in Tel Aviv. I know how to feel like I belong. Now, I don't think that what that 8 to 9 year old was feeling is actually different from what many of us feel, have felt, or will feel when we start new roles, when we start new jobs. This thought process isn't restricted to 7 year olds at all. And we may use different words to describe it, but I think it's the same feeling. One of them is reputation. Where you are now in your career boot camp, you may have built your reputation. Maybe people go, oh, I know that this person is really, really good at this particular language, and I can go to them asking help. And when you go to a new place, you don't necessarily, you may not think you have that reputation. You might be worried that you're not going to be able to carry it over. Commitments and purpose. This is knowing what activities you should engage in order to be successful. Folks like yourselves, as you come towards the end of your bootcamp, you have been successful in this bootcamp environment. And you may be aware that while they do prepare you for the working world, it will be different in some ways. And you may be worried about some of the activities that you may need to find in order, you may need to engage in, and how to engage in those activities in order to be successful. And another thing that can intimidate us when we get to a new place is culture. Do we feel like we belong? I mean, imposter syndrome is part of that, but there are so many other things. Maybe you come from a different background, it seems like many of the people you're going to be working with, or you feel like everyone's gone to university, or everyone's somehow different in some way. You might feel different. Now, I'm not going to act like all of these just suddenly disappear once you get over them, but I'm going to share with you some of the things that helped me get over these in my 100 days. Okay, so I get to day 7, and I feel like day 7 is where you've actually onboarded. Maybe you've got your logins, your signups, you've learned how just the company platforms work. Then I think the first of those 3 phases I talked about starts, and that is observing. Observation is one of the most crucial steps when you start a new role. There are many things that may not be included in the onboarding training. Like, what is the office culture like? What's the management style like? Who are the key partners that you're going to have to work with? Whose emails do you need to know, or who do you need to get some face to face meetings with quite early on? Where are the best office snacks? All of these things may not necessarily be included in the onboarding training, but they're important. Observing and gathering as much information as you can about your new role and about who you're going to be working with, who those stakeholders are, gathering all of that information. But while you're doing that, there are a few transition traps, I call them, that you need to avoid. And I'll just talk to you a little bit about them. Sticking exclusively to what you know. As you observe, don't stick exclusively to what you know and cut out everything that you have the opportunity to learn. Look out for the ways that your new colleagues are doing things. Look out for the skills that they may be able to teach you. Observe how they operate. And also be careful not to fall prey to the action imperative. This is where you feel like you need to be hitting the ground running at 1000%. Oftentimes, management, they know and understand that there is a ramping up period, a time before you actually hit 100%. So don't feel like you need to suddenly be hitting 100% and trying to make completions and complete actions straight away. Another thing you should be careful not to fall in as you're observing and gathering all of this information is not only focus on learning the technical part of the business. Now, a while back, there was something that went viral about the 10x engineer, about this engineer who doesn't like to talk to anyone, locks himself in a room, but is a brilliant engineer. Um, and people are like, yeah, I only need one of those rather than 10 of your engineers that actually like to talk to each other and have meetings and collaborate. I really don't think a 10x engineer is actually good. Having an understanding and learning the overall business model of your company and understanding the business value of your role What does your code actually bring to the table? Those things can actually be more important than your tech skills. Excuse me. Your tech adjacent skills, those are the things that actually allow your technical skills to shine. So don't only focus on learning the technical parts, focus also on learning about some of the non-technical things that are happening in your teams and at work. So let's just quickly go over those. Don't stick to exclusively what you know. Do not fall prey to the action imperative, feeling like you need to start having wins on day one, on week one. And don't only focus on learning technical sides of the business, but rather what you can start doing is negotiating success. This is really, really key. I like to say that you should focus on building a productive working relationship with your new manager. Different managers have different working styles, but maybe yours could be to schedule weekly one-on-ones with your manager, asking your manager, how are we going to go about getting feedback from each other? How are we going to go about asking for help? And setting those frameworks in place now, when everything is great and you're new, means that when things are not so great, you already have this framework that you've agreed upon in order to have that productive working relationship. And also, keep your balance. Being committed to your job is great, but don't overcommit to an unsustainable goal. All right. So we've been observing. We've been gathering as much information about this new role, about this new company, about our new teammates and management style. And then for me, this happened about day 30. You begin to understand. You're beginning to put the pieces together. And those technical skills that you've learned are really beginning to connect with the business value at the company. You can do all the mathematics in your head. Once again, there are some bad behaviors that people really fall into as they begin to get comfortable. Some people still overplay the I am still new card. I have been at other places, not necessarily in tech, where people are saying I am still new, like almost a year into a role. Yes, you are new when you get started, and the team and your manager know this, and you do not have to be perfect. You should still ask for help, but don't let it get in the way of learning opportunities. This is where you should be responsible. And what does that mean? That means if maybe there is a thing that you're not sure how to do, you can tell someone that you are new, but make sure you observe and watch how they do it so that you don't need to go to them to do the same thing and say, I am new again. Don't overplay the I am still new card. Now, this will not be in your first week. This may not even be in your first month. But just as you get comfortable, look for opportunities to start taking the initiative. Another thing you should not be careful not to do is over nostalgia. Now, this is very, very common more with people who are maybe transitioning into different roles or different companies. But over nostalgia, I like to think of a grizzly old person saying, back in my day, everything was different. We did things that way. And that can often be the way it is in tech. Maybe different places do different work in different ways. And maybe there was something you really liked, maybe about your boot camp or a place you'd worked before or a place you'd done an internship. And you want to bring those new ideas. Bring those new ideas, but make sure that the way you do it is constructive rather than just saying, oh, this is crap. Back in my day, we used to do it in this other way and it was so much better. Make sure you bring a positive attitude, even if you're bringing changes. And then one that I still suffer from is superhero syndrome. It's where you overpromise and underdeliver. You can't save anyone, everyone. Keep track of the commitments that you make because if you start saying yes to everything, you will begin to fail at a lot of things. So make sure you focus on what you can actually deliver. And then be careful, and this is not necessarily a technical thing, but a career piece of advice. Do not play hide and seek. Have you ever noticed that there is someone, maybe at university, this happened to me, or in school, someone that you introduced, you met them on day one, and then you never see them again? Maybe you see them on exam day. You don't want to be that person. Make sure some of those connections that you've made that you think will be useful for you in your role, and maybe sometimes even if they're not useful, they might be friendly faces. Make sure you keep those connections warm as you go along your working journey. So let's go over those bad behaviors. Overplaying the I'm still new card, over nostalgia, not trying to move forward and learn new things, but only reminiscing on the past. Superhero syndrome, where people overpromise and underdeliver, and then hide and seek, people who do not maintain those good relationships. But some good practices that you can do while you're trying to understand the business is asking questions. Never be afraid to ask why. There's something which I love, which is number of times that someone has said an acronym and someone puts up their hand and asks, what does that acronym mean? And other people who've even been there longer than the person who asked are like, thank God I didn't know the answer to that either. Also, there are many available resources that are going to be given to you at your company. Companies spend a lot of money, they invest a lot into resources to help their teams get better. So make sure you're using those available resources. One of the biggest ones is your managers and your colleagues' time and attention, asking them maybe if you have a pair programming opportunities you can do to try and use those resources to get better. Anyway, day 60. This was where I began to feel like, I'm getting good at this. You know what? I'm not bad. I'm not bad. And this is where you start doing my favorite phase, creation. It is your time to shine, and you are ready to take ownership. Now, remember, these things work in a cycle. So always feel free to revisit the observation or understanding phase if you need to, and continue to iterate. But this is where you begin to create business value wherever you work. Now, for me, that happened at 100 days. It might happen at a different pace for you. Now, at Twilio, one of our core values is to draw the owl, and it comes back from this meme that was very popular way back in 2010. How to draw an owl. I've taken some of the words because it goes like draw two circles, draw the rest of the effing owl, right? And it really is kind of an example of the fact that there is no instruction book. It's yours to write. You have to figure it out, ship it, and iterate. You're going to invent the future, but don't just wing it. And a part of it is just stop talking about all of the things you want to do and start doing it. Your career is like this out. There is no instruction manual telling you detailed stroke by stroke how you're going to do it. Remember, take a bit of artistic creativity and license and draw your out. And what's going to happen is, as you go on about creating, you're going to be creating some value. Now, there's a thing called the break even point, which is a very, very popular business model. Now, I've taken away the timeline because it usually says how many days it should be. But let's just talk about this. Now, your company needed you. So they took time and they took time and spent resources, spent money on people doing interviews. They interviewed a bunch of people and it took them time to hire you. And let's say like zero is where they actually hired you. And now you begin to consume value. So at first you're consuming value first of all in like your paycheck. You're also taking skills, you're learning things. And then at one point you're gonna break even and start to create value. You're starting to create value for the business that has employed you. And at one point you have this thing called the break even point, which is where all the value you've created now has like offset the amount of investment they were putting into you, training you up and stuff. Now, do not see this as a monetary goal. Do not like do some back of the like paper maths, back of the envelope mathematics and work out, okay, this is how much they pay me, this is how much they pay for the training things. I need to make this much money. Because the value that you bring may not be in the shape you thought it was. You might bring value by improving the culture on the team. You might bring a new way of thinking. But what's important is that you see this as an opportunity to bring value to the company that you're working at. See this as an advantage. You take advantage of the value that you're consuming, all of those skills, and you're consuming it and using it to create even more value. So as you get more comfortable, as you learn more, continue to figure out ways to earn and to create more value for the organization that you be in. And then day 100, you're now in the groove. You have been learning, you've been observing, understanding, you've been creating, and now you just want to keep it going. You want to keep it 100. And then this is where I like to say it's good to always recheck your work-life time balance. Make sure you take the time to reflect personally outside of work. Because your personal well-being is a key aspect to your life and it enables you to succeed just as much, if not more, than your actual technical skills. Understanding your circumstances and where you've come from is crucial to informing the right goals for yourself. And you may find that your personal life begins to change with your new job. It really did for me. I was listening to a talk once and it described a phenomenon called a class straddler. And I really identified with it. So I just want to talk about it a little bit if you don't mind. It was Michelle Glosia who talked about this, and she talked about there are many. She talked about what a class straddler is, and it's someone who blew up in a blue collar situation and now has a white collar life. And I felt like I was kind of that person. I grew up in a very blue collar household, and suddenly, with all of the resources that working in tech was giving me, I was having a different life from the one that I kind of grew up with. And it was interesting. As a straddler, I sometimes felt like I didn't quite fit in with many of my old friends and people I used to hang out about. And there were some things I couldn't relate with my family members with anymore. And I felt a little bit uncomfortable at the same time, though, with some of the middle class lifestyles or like the kind of more affluent lifestyles of my new friends or the new people I was interacting with. Oftentimes, it shows itself in different scenarios. People show up maybe overdressed or act very formally in casual situations. And don't even get me started on defining the smart casual look. I am hit and miss with that all the time. But also, this can sometimes mean I forget to ask help, or I feel awkward about requesting connections, or intimidated by people that I perceive as being in charge, or people who I perceive as being very successful. Now, you may or may not be a class straddler, but what truly matters is understanding how your new job and the new experiences that will come with it will affect your life. Recognizing how those experiences shape your understanding of working life, they can prepare you for some of the encounters that may come your way. All right. Oh, this was a slide I put in when I gave this talk on my 1 year anniversary, so I need to update that. But next, to infinity and beyond. This is what even I do not know. Remember, your career is a marathon. It's not a sprint, but you can ensure that you have a strong start. You can remember to do the 3 phases. Observe, gathering as much information about everything you can about your new role when you get started, learning all of those things. Understanding. Never shy away from asking why, asking those questions. And then create. Go and draw the owl. And remember, that every successful career is a series of successful assignments, and every successful assignment is launched with a successful transition. This may be you getting prepared for your first job, for a new job, for a new role, or just a new company. You can use some of these techniques and things that I've talked about to make sure you get from 0 to 100 real quick. Thank you so much for listening to me. I really enjoyed it. If you want to keep up with my journey, you can follow me on socials at ChatterboxCoder. And thank you.
Whoa, there you go. Look at that. That was a great talk. And I've got so much that I want to talk about from that talk, and we've got a few questions coming through now that I'm going to pass your way if that's okay as well.
No
Um,
worries.
Thank you for that. And I think the overall message that I got from that really comes down to me. So I'm just going to change some of the screens layouts very quickly. One of the things that I really got from that was that curve of value. And one of the questions from one of the students that I'll come on to in a second really addresses that. But I think it's so important for people to realize in those first days, your company doesn't expect you to hit the ground running. Like you can't just come in and be like, look at all of this value I'm creating. Like because companies when they hire you, they realize that is an investment they're making in you as well to understand the culture, to understand what's going on around you before you can. I don't know if it was yourself that was talking about or if it was if it was Phil that was saying, getting that first thing done of even just pushing a picture
Yeah.
of your, get something done and makes people feel like they're contributing without pushing them to try and like run with their role straight off the bat, which is almost impossible. And I think it's really important for people to take away that, those first 100 days are important to get yourself up to that level, but understand that your company doesn't expect you to come in and be doing everything straight away. So thank you for that. In fact, I wanted to ask one Anna's asked this question here. How do you not overwork yourself in those first 100 days? I tend to work at an extra capability from the start and then burn out because the company expects me to sort of come in at this intersector that's so high and I keep it at that level. What would your advice be for people in those first 100 days and beyond when you're coming in and almost, I guess, feel like you have to prove yourself, right?
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. And oftentimes, much of that feeling is coming from within. Like the colleagues and the people around us, they're like, whoa, this person's working, like doing so much. The number of times I've had conversations with people who started at Twitter, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you are making me feel like I underworked because you hit the ground and you started doing so much more than
Yeah.
we expected. And this is where I think it's really important to have a great relationship, working relationship with your manager. Go to your manager and try and quantify what success actually looks like. And the reason I like to do that is because now I have a thing that exists outside of me, which is a measure of how much effort I should put in. Because oftentimes, if I'm just doing it based on how I feel, I'm going to end up doing way more. But having clear, concise goals with my manager or with maybe my team about what we want to achieve, then I know that I can work with it. And then also another thing is if you realize, even if you're enjoying it, that you are working longer than 9 to 5. I do that a lot of the time, so I'm gonna not gonna say I'm not a hypocrite here. But if you realize that okay, the only way I'm able to do all of these things I'm doing is by working longer than 9 to 5. Now, lots of people like to take the extra commitment, and I'm not trying to say people should never do that. There are times where it may be useful to you in your career, but one thing you don't want to do is set a standard so high that is unmaintainable.
Yeah.
So maybe in those first couple of weeks, you say, okay, I'm going to limit myself to like working between these hours, or I'm going to limit myself to doing something within this time box. And even if you feel like you can give more, sometimes it's worth using that more on yourself. Go
Yeah.
have fun, do something you enjoy. But once again, finding something outside of you, like a conversation with your manager or your team with like objectives so that you know that you can do those. And even if you feel like you could do more, you have done what you should do. And then at the same time, sometimes setting some boundaries at the start and just saying, these are my boundaries, I will not break them. Like having that conversation with your manager. So, for example, me, I work a lot with Americans. And that means oftentimes when I started, I would be like having meetings up until like 7, 8, 9, even 10 p.m. at night. And it would happen on all days. And eventually I got to a point, and this maybe it was when I felt more comfortable, where I said, okay, Wednesday is my America day. If it's not Wednesday, do not like put a meeting with me. And then I'd have all of my meetings on one evening
Yeah.
on a Wednesday. And just setting that boundary, I still worked late, right? But just setting that boundary made it more sustainable for me in the long.
Sorry, I was just looking at it. That's an incredible answer, and I think the chat is going mad about your JavaScript poster, by the
It's nice,
way.
right?
Yeah. Um, so yeah, for me, and I think that setting those boundaries is super important. Sorry, the people are loving the JavaScript poster. Setting those boundaries are really important for yourself. Um, and the thing is it's very easy when you're in a technical role as well, isn't it? Because we are explorers in this industry. We are creatives, and you can find yourself working on a project that you genuinely love, and then it kind of blurs sometimes the boundaries between what is work and what is what something you enjoy. But the point is it's really, really important to understand and take an internal look, like you say, understand external expectations, but take an internal look on how you feel as well, because it's very easy sometimes, isn't it, to push and push and push because you're enjoying something and then realize actually, well, I've got nothing left in the tank now, and that's really difficult to pull yourself back from without taking time out to sort of to re-energize. Um, Another question is on neurodiversity or people who are struggling with the team aspect. You talked about in the first, the first week, I think it was quite a lot around understanding and focusing on the team and the culture, and trying to embed in at that point. And what advice would you give to people who maybe struggle with, you know, maybe they feel more like the 10x developer, they want to be away from everything and silo themselves because that's their natural state, but pushing through that and becoming part of the team and the culture.
I think that so I think one thing is that different people interact with others in different ways. Now, I definitely think that I am an extrovert most of the time. I kind of switch, but that I'm an extrovert most of the time. So I'm like, yo, let's have a conversation, let's grab a drink, right? Or let's talk to each other face to face. And one thing that I kind of learned over time is that not all of my colleagues appreciated that. This was when I first started. Not all of my colleagues loved the like loud, rambunctious, like Nathaniel. And there were certain colleagues I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to have a meeting with them after they've had their first coffee rather than before they've had their first coffee. And what I really want to mean is like, even if you are someone who maybe is more introverted and you don't necessarily have like just want to talk to people in the same way that I maybe want to do as well. On both sides, we both need to remember that we need to A, talk to our colleagues about how we want to interact with them so we
Great
can
point.
find the
Great point.
best way. And then also B, as we be flexible, also ask others to be flexible with us. So, how does that work for me? I have some colleagues who whenever we want to talk, we're both very extroverted. We love chatting. If we want to have a quick conversation about something or catch up, we'll literally be like, do you have time for a Zoom call? We'll jump in a Zoom call, we'll laugh and joke, and then have some conversation, clarify what we need to do. I have some others who they wanted it only in writing on Slack. And that was something which I struggled with. I really struggled to articulate myself in a message. I often felt like when I was writing a message, my tone was going to be wrong. So, what I started doing is finding a compromise. So, what I used to do was I would record a video, and on Zoom has this beautiful, sorry, Slack has this cool function where it will transcribe your video, or I'll record a voice note and just kind of talk as if I was talking to them in a meeting, and it would transcribe it and then send it to them. There
Amazing.
are lots of things maybe people can do with like tools with AI to kind of summarize what they said into just like bullet points and send those over. And I'm giving talking to you as if I am an extrovert who sometimes needs to interact with introverts. But I think the universal kind of rule that you can take away is set your boundaries on how you want people to interact with you, and good colleagues will be flexible to some extent. And then also maybe there are other people that you can also be a bit flexible with. So it's balancing both of those sides, but figuring out what works best for you for your communication, what works best for other people, your team around you for communication with them, and then find the middle ground. So like mine is my voice notes and videos to those colleagues because I know that they like asynchronous. They don't want to waste time in a meeting. Like I'm like, I don't mind if we have 5 minutes to chat and then 10 minutes of work. They plan their days differently to me. So being able to be flexible, I think, is a skill that that's gonna help you so much in your career.
I think that's an incredible answer. I really do. I think, yeah, understanding your personal mode, understanding other people's personal modes, and then finding that blend.
We
But
used to have an executive actually. Sorry, I didn't mean
no, no,
to
please.
disturb you, but this is an executive. So this was the CTO or CPO of the company. So like this is someone who's like lots of people in perception would be like they're killing it in their career, right? They had I thought it was kind of like I loved it. They had an API documentation on how to like interact with them or communicate with them. So they were like, if you want to send like something small, like send it as an email, like with this information. Like so a couple of different things, kind of just as a framework, as a guide, as a suggestion to other people on how to effectively communicate with them. You may not necessarily write down your whole own API, the API of yourself. It was literally like the API of Chi. Um, but you can still talk to your colleagues and still talk to them about what you enjoy about communication and kind of come to some agreements with each other as a team.
That's incredible. Everyone's loving that. So I think that's maybe a great approach that people can take away. Um, I guess this is a cultural question, but I think it's something that Certainly, new people coming into tech definitely feel as well. Do you feel that there's a perception when you're starting in a company that if you're not at your computer, you're not working, especially for developers?
Um, okay, so this is definitely different company by company. I am very, very fortunate that I do not work at a company that does that. I don't know anyone personally at the minute who works at a tech company writing software where they are done that. But I have heard about many tools and I have seen those tools like talk about how popular they're getting. So I cannot, in good conscience, tell you that it's not going to happen anywhere. Especially right now, we're in a kind of period in tech where all of the companies are keeping an extra eye on their resources, which includes their people and their people's time. Uh, so, uh, so I can't, in good conscience, say that it will never happen. However, one thing is that a majority of companies they uh, really assess your performance by what you create, not by how much time or how much lines of code that you sit at your computer and write. So it's funny, like when Elon Musk did his craziness and he actually told engineers at Twitter, he said, print out the code you have written and come to like bring those lines of codes as like evidence of how much work you've done. And like the whole industry was like, well, that's stupid because that's not a measure of productivity. A crappy developer can write way many more lines than what a really good developer who just spends like half an hour thinking about the problem and then writes a few lines of code than someone who just like brute forces it in long lines of code. So I will say like companies are usually more flexible and they care more about outcomes than they care about are you sitting at your computer. Um, B, also again, having a conversation with your managers and do this not just after you join, do this during your interview period, asking them like, how do we measure success in this company? Like, do we measure success by like how many pull requests? Like, what is the measure of success? So you don't have any surprises when you start. I do this every time. I interview. I've not left Twilio, but like if I ever interview somewhere, I always ask. I always say like, what what's your measure of success? What are the things that when we come to my yearly meeting, are you going to be like, you did this, you did that, good, 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 or bad, bad, bad? So understanding what those are. So far, again, people look at outcomes for better or for worse. And the reason I say for better or for worse is I am very fortunate. My job is very flexible. So there are days, I always say that there are days where I look at my job and I go, oh, I like, how do I get paid to do this? Like, I haven't really done much work today. And then there are other days where I'm like, yo, I do not get paid enough. I've worked from like dusk till dawn because I needed to maybe finish a project or I had a deadline coming up. So yeah, stuff like that.
And I think that that's, it comes back to company culture, exactly as you said. I hear what I guess we'd call internally as horror stories of people who, they have to log when they're at their desk.
Yeah,
They
I've
have to literally log the time. And I look at that and I think, that's crazy. That's their culture. But the point is, and I think it comes back to you choosing where you want to be and how you want to work, is there are people that will want to work in those organizations and there are people that won't. And depending on your circumstances, and again, it may sound like coming from a privileged position of saying, I don't have to work in a place like that, so I won't. Um, but yeah, in fact, our CTO has just come on here and just said, you know, uh, I, half of my time I'm not thinking at my desk. I don't know. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but he always talking about the shower solution, and it's like
yeah,
I will literally be in the shower, and he talks about this openly with the team. It's like sometimes you've got to take yourself away from your desk, away from the situation, and he openly says, it's the shower solution. I'll be standing in the shower, and all of a sudden I won't even realize I'm thinking about it, and it'll be like, ah, that's the answer to that technical challenge that I'm trying to solve.
precisely.
So I, I personally think that it's no measure, but I agree with you that there are some companies out there that culturally will say the measure is how long you're sat at your desk. It's like if anything, in my opinion, sorry, that's a countermeasure because like you are giving people the opportunity to creatively solve something.
I
Um,
think what has happened is for so many years in business, they have like they have been like they're trying to take the model of the assembly line where like you can literally go. how many like how many clothes did you sew together today as a
Yeah.
measure of people's productivity? And people are trying to take those old archaic models of like what productivity looks like and just like they don't want to change it, they don't want to transform it, they're just trying to dump it on technology, which I do not think is just I don't think that works. But there are idiots everywhere.
If we look at how we run projects in an agile manner, for example, we have an end goal, we have a sprint of where we need to get to. And I think it was your point earlier, is as long as we know the end goal, to be honest, the process, in my mind, is individual. There has to be checks and balances along the way, and we as a team have to understand what each other's doing, etc., etc., etc. But for me, it's always about the outcome. And I say as well to the team, internally, it's like, where are we going to get to at the end of the week? What does good look like? How can we define what good looks like? And then culturally, we should be able to work out and deconstruct how we get there. Anyway, we're going off on a massive tangent, but I think it's a very good one because it is really those first 100 days is about finding that culture and understanding how you fit into it. I'm sorry, the
Absolutely.
chat's going absolutely bananas, but it's just about people talking about showers and baths are actually quite a lot of eureka moments. I'm gonna probably stop the chat there. I think there are a few other questions coming in, but what I'll do if that's okay is pop them over via email and then let people know. Nathaniel, I want to say thank you once again for your second stint on the Careers Week for us this week, and again another incredible talk because I think it's always a concern for people going into those first 100 days, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a concern for me, even as like sometimes like I've had promotions here, and it's a concern for me when I have my promotions. Like, am I actually achieving what I want to achieve? Lots of people here are ambitious. I'm quite ambitious as well, I like to think, and trying to just find those like that maximum level. And there's so many ways I fail. Like, there's so many ways that I need to learn lessons and get better. But it's part of the process. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
There you go. Awesome. Thank you once again, Nathaniel, and thank you everyone for joining. And we'll see you again at